Personally, maybe it's just because I was born in the 60s, but I was taught to hold my pencil like this, between my thumb and my pointing finger, and I curl these fingers here underneath, like a fist. Okay, so what I'm actually doing is I'm holding my pencil like this. Some people have been taught that you brace the pencil with your swearing finger, okay, by placing the pencil up against your finger like this, and then you hold it like that. What that inevitably will cause is an artist callus on your finger. How many people have artist calluses? Where you got that nice cool lump on the edge there, but it looks really gross. Okay, I got nice clean fingers, I don't have those lumps. But I've seen people who have huge, enormous lumps there, just from the pencil rubbing up against it over the years. Okay, unsightly is what I call it. But the thing that I have found just over the years, and this is again just my personal preference, is that when you're drawing lines, there is the pivot point, so that when you're drawing, you're pivoting on your knuckle here. I mean, not to say that you can't use your hand like this as well if you're doing something larger, but I tend to keep my movements minimalized like this. Then when I'm getting into some finer stuff, what I'll do is I'll just use my fingers this way. I'll draw like this, where I'm not even moving my hand. I'm actually locking my fingers are down on the paper, and I'm doing this type of an action here, okay, which is for finer control, so I can move my fingers around any way I want into the little parts. Then the third thing is that I have the flexibility of doing this. I can roll the pencil in my fingers, which allows me to create line quality if I want to. So if I'm using a lead pencil, I don't use it so much with the blue pencil here because this is very rough and loose, and I usually do what's called feathering my line when I'm trying to create a thick and thin effect. So by that, what I'm talking about here is that if I draw a line with my pencil, which is fairly sharp right now, but if I just draw a line like this, it's all pretty much the same size, the same thickness all the way through. There is a little bit of a taper up at the top here where it comes to a point, and it's a little bit thicker down here. That's just, part of it is just, it's just inherent in me that when I draw, I usually press lighter up at the top and then harder down at the bottom, and it creates that thick and thin type of a feel to it. So part of it is just the pressure of the pencil against the paper, but also you'll note, and this is one of the finer points of drawing, that when you sharpen your pencil, if we did a microscopic version of the tip of your pencil, the tip would come to an extreme point like this, a very, very sharp point. And you know, you'll always tap your finger against, or your pencil against your finger to see how sharp it is, or tap it like that to make sure it's nice and sharp. What happens is, as you draw, you place your pencil against the paper, you're basically wearing down the tip of the pencil. And what ends up happening is you get this little chiseled edge here that will appear. Now in some cases, like with normal uses, you hold your pencil and sometimes you'll do a little bit of a rotation to it, like this is your drawing. What ends up happening is the tip actually gets multiple little chisels on it that look something like a rocky crag mountain type thing, where there's all these little chisel points on the edge of it. Okay, but by holding your pencil firmly in your hand, what you do is you chisel off that tip so it's actually looking like this three-dimensionally. And then what you can do is you can place that edge, if I draw it down this way, I can place that edge against a sheet of paper like this, and it will cause the thickness of the line to be this distance here. But if I rotate the pencil around to that tip point, what I'm actually doing is I'm turning the pencil so it's going like this on that tip. And so now the thickness of the pencil is just the tip. So by simply rotating the pencil in my fingers, I can create a thick and thin line. Okay, and that's why sometimes at animators' desks, if you look at an animator's desk, how they've got, the table is over to the side here, they'll have a strip of paper. So here's their desk, like this, with the peg bar in here. And you may have wondered, I mean, these desks here are symmetrical where the circle is in the center, but some desks have the circle off to the side to allow for the exposure sheets to be pegged up here. But some animators, what they'll do is they'll tack on or tape a sheet of blank paper up to the edge here. And what they do is they take their pencil and they do this. You'll see all these squiggly marks, and what they're doing is they're chiseling the pencil down, okay, to a fine point. So if I do this, I'm actually creating that edge to my pencil right now. So when I take that and I put that flat edge against it, see the thickness? Now watch what happens. As I rotate the pencil on my finger, I go from thick to thin. And so I can create a thick and thin line just by rotating the pencil in my fingers. And usually that's the way you do a cleanup. You don't do a cleanup using a feathered technique, which is what I've been doing, where you're going over the line like this, and you build it up So it looks like a feather on the edge there. Okay, that's a rough form of doing it. And you can still do that with a regular pencil, but if you're doing really fine lines, usually like with an HB pencil or an H pencil, when you get into the sharper or harder edge of it, your lines tend to be very, very accurate like this. And you probably have found that when you're doing your in-betweens, you tend to draw that way. You're drawing your lines like this. Okay, so what ends up happening is if you draw your line like that and your line thickness is always the same, what invariably ends up happening is you create what's called a wire bent line, which means that it looks like a piece of wire that has equal thickness all the way through it, and it just looks like it's been bent into the shape of the character. And that can tend to make your character look very flat and unappealing. By adding in the thick and thin line to it, it adds weight to the character and dimension to the drawing. And you'll find that some of the better artists will use this thick and thin in order to create that dimension to it. Right? So it's something you have to sort of work away at over the years in order to develop. Being an assistant animator is one of the ways you learn how to do that, because you're basically taking the animator's rough drawings and you're having to clean them up. And by cleaning them up, you have to control your line quality as best you can. And so it's a great training ground in order to do that. One of the things that I just recently wrote about was the idea that, like, this is for a tips of character designers. There's a website that's up that has various people giving different tips, professional tips, about how what their number one tip would be to, if you couldn't, it's like when you go to a desert island, you say you can only have one book, what book would you take? So you sort of, they're asking different people in character design to say, if you can only give one tip, what would your tip be? So the tip that I just gave last night was a tip that is generally frowned upon in the art world, that you've probably been told this as a young artist in high school and grade school and whatnot, and that is never copy. Like, don't trace. You guys heard that? Okay, it's like a bad thing. Oh, don't trace that drawing because it's not your original drawing. And my feeling on this is the exact opposite. It's actually copy and trace as much as you can, but don't do it just for the sake of tracing and copying. Do it for the purpose of trying to figure out, what did the original artist have in mind when they were doing this drawing? What were they thinking when they drew this line? What does this line represent? Why is it so thick here? Why is it thin here? Why is it curved this way? Okay, you start to ask those questions and you begin to understand why the artist drew something like that. Put it in this context. If you guys later on decide to get into 2D animation exclusively, and this is not for 3D because it doesn't apply, but if you decide to get into 2D animation, and let's say you're hired at a studio as either a character designer, we'll use the character design as the example. So you're a character designer and you're hired to work on a specific production, right? Whatever that production is. It could be something that's currently in production and they need someone to add on extra designs for it. So let's say, just pull out of the top of my head, My Little Pony. My Little Pony has a set design style. It may not be the same as your personal style. So when you walk into the studio and they say, you're a character designer on My Little Pony, we need more little ponies for this upcoming feature film we're doing. Could you please design them? And you have your own personal house style that you do. You can't draw My Little Pony in your design style. It won't match the pre-existing designs. So therefore you have to learn what is the existing design style for My Little Pony. And the way you do that is by copying the existing drawings. And so you go through that very methodically. Whenever I've gone into a studio, whatever production I'm working on, there's a set routine that you would do. You would get a package of model sheets, they'd hand them to you, and they'd say, learn how to draw the characters. So you go through it step by step. Number one, you take the original model sheet, you put a blank sheet of paper over top of it with your light table on, and you trace the drawings off. But again, you don't just mindlessly trace, you think, why is this volume here? What is this volume? What is this structure? Why are the hands drawn this way? Why are the eyes this shape? Why is the nose this shape? What is the proportion of the eyes to the head? Why is the ear in this position? Why is it that shape? Why does the mouth form this way? Where's the jawline? Okay, you ask all those questions. Then what you do is you set the model sheet off to the side and you take a blank sheet of paper and you then copy the poses. You try to replicate them by eye, trying to keep the proportions the same and all the design elements exactly the same, so that your drawing looks basically exactly the same as the model sheet, but you didn't trace it. You drew it freehand. And then the third stage is you begin to create your own poses based on the pre-existing designs. So you're now putting the characters into different poses, but again, maintaining the structure and volumes. Okay, so it's through that gradated process of learning how to draw the character that you then absorb what that design process is. And then suddenly you're drawing exactly the same way that the My Little Pony designs are drawn. And then you can start to design the other characters for it. So any production that you ever work on, you're going to have to do that. Let's say the next job that you were working on was a brand new version of let's say, Care Bears. Okay? And again, your design style, let's say you were to draw a Care Bear. Let me just grab a blank sheet of paper. I can't remember exactly what a Care Bear looks like, but let's say you were just assigned to work on Care Bears, and you decided this is what the Care Bears look like because this is the way you like to draw. He's got to have a heart for a nose, sorry. So there's your version of a Care Bear. Well, that's not what a Care Bear actually looks like. Okay, the eyes are not like that. They have a different style of eyes. The proportions are probably completely different. But if you started animating the characters like this, I'm sure the directing animator would probably look at your scenes and go, you know what? That's not the way the Care Bear is supposed to look. Because if all the other artists in the animation department are all animating the characters on model, and then all of a sudden your scene comes up and it looks like this, people are going to go, what the heck is that? That doesn't make sense. It breaks the flow and it breaks the continuity, right? So you have to basically conform to the studio's design style. And one of the biggest compliments that I was ever given when I was at the studio was someone came up to me after years of having worked together at the same studio. They said, you're like a human chameleon. You can grab any design style and draw in that way almost instantaneously. And it's through training, being able to see what the design looks like. So if you set a model sheet in front of me, I could take that model sheet and replicate it fairly easily. It'd take a little bit of time, you know, I'd be slow at first, but I'd get into it and do it. And that's what I do for fun, is I'll take pre-existing designs of characters. As a matter of fact, last night, I was watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs because I'm doing a little analysis on that for myself. I'm reading a couple of books on it, about the production of it, and I'm watching the movie as I read the different parts. And then I'm going in and I've got the 50th anniversary DVD set, which has all the deleted sequences. So I watched some of the deleted sequences from the bedroom argument scene and saw some really cool looking Grumpy drawings. So I decided I'm going to freeze frame this and I'm going to draw Grumpy in those poses. Because Freddie Moore did the animation for it. He's an amazing animator. And I sort of wanted to get into that design style. So I started replicating the drawings, watching it on screen and drawing it on paper, and trying to copy exactly what those characters look like. It's not for any purpose of, you know, job or anything like that. I'm not going to try and sell the drawings because that would be wrong. That's plagiarism. Okay, so you don't do it for that purpose. But it's for the purpose of learning. This is how the character is put together. This is what the character looks like. And now I can start to integrate some of that design style into some of the other designs that I might be doing. And you just sort of grab. You've got this library of different design styles that you can pick and choose at any given point in time. Okay, so back to what we're doing here. So I'm going to trace off my ball now in this position. So there's my number 5 position. So now what I want to do is I want to go in and I'm going to do my number 3 position, which is the halfway between 1 and, not 1 and 5, but it'll follow the same arcing path of action. So it's not actually a halfway in between. I don't need my number 8 in order to do this because I do have my breakdown sheet here. So I can block the exact position of it right there. So this will be drawing number 3. We find our fulcrum point. I'm going to find that halfway position, which is right there. Right. So now what I'm going to do, in order to make sure that I'm doing the proper in-between on this, I'm going to take my number 1 drawing, put it down like this, take my number 5 drawing, rotate it so that it's matching up to the point, and just double checking to make sure that it's on the same angle, which it is. Okay, it's on the exact same angle. So what I can do now is I can just simply take this one here and shift it and trace it off.